Hello, welcome to another immigration art video. My name is Art Serratelli, and together with Mara Mijal, the two of us, we run the immigration law firm of Serratelli Mijal, PLLC. We've got clients all over the United States, and we've got clients all over the world. We're the lawyers down at the end of your arm inside your smartphone. We do all sorts of things that other lawyers need you to go into the office for. And there's video Skyping, there is WhatsApp, there is video Hangouts on Google. We've got something called email. It's crazy. There are even social media apps where you can send messages. And we look at text messages. You want to communicate with us? You certainly have lots of ways to do it. Our practice focuses exclusively on employment-based immigration cases and family-based immigration cases, and we can even get you United States citizenship. The topic of today's video is getting back to basics. Just what the heck is a green card based on employment? And I mean the basics. I am not going to get involved in all the details that can just make your brain melt. We're going to look at the big picture. What the heck do you need to know to make sense of all this stuff out there on the internet, including, I confess, some of the stuff on our immigration art video channel. So let's start at the beginning. Number one, what are the types of green cards you could get through employment? Well, everybody starts with EB1, EB2, EB3, EB4, EB5. No, and I even did that in a prior video. Here's what you got to start with. Are you sponsoring yourself? And that's rare. You got to be really special. Or are you sponsored by your employer, which is normal. Normally, you're sponsored by your employer. Here, take a look at this chart. It's got 3 columns, and I'll tell you why in a minute. The first column is the self-sponsored green cards. The middle column and the last column over on the right, those two are employer-sponsored. You gotta have an employer stand behind your application. That's more normal than column 1. So now, if you're in that last column over on the right, employer-sponsored, you'll see in the second row and in the third row, the EB2 row and the EB3 row, you'll see 2 categories of green card through employment called PERM labor certification. What's that mean? This is the most typical, the most common type of green card based on work. It's where your employer sponsors you. What does it mean when the employer sponsors you? Well, they simply do this. With the attorney, they test the labor market. Now, what does that mean? The PERM green card labor certification process involves 3 steps. We're just talking about that far right column, the second row and the third row, PERM labor certification. The employer's got to test the local labor market. What does that mean? Testing the labor market simply means, is there an American out there or a green card holder out there in the neighborhood around where you work? Is there someone out there that would want the job you have? Get this. Normally you are working in the job and you want to keep it and keep it permanently with a green card. But because this employer is the first one signing up to sponsor you, it's their responsibility to make sure that there's no one in the local labor market who wants your job. Why? Because you, in theory, are taking forever out of the American workforce a job that could be held by an American citizen or a green card holder. You also may have heard that you've got to test the labor market, and it's normally through advertising. You might hear people say, oh, we got to advertise the job. I can't get you any sponsorship. We have to advertise. Our company doesn't do that. Sponsorship, advertising, people use words very sloppy. If you're confused about a word you're hearing, email me. I'll tell you what they mean in the context in which you hear them. And that's the essence of the word labor certification. The employer has to certify to the Department of Labor that they tested the labor market according to the rules of the Department of Labor, and the Department of Labor has to approve the process used by the employer. That is the labor certification part of the PERM labor certification process. And again, this whole discussion only occurs in those 2 boxes in the far right column. In row number 2, the EB, Employment-Based Preference 2 row, last column, and EB3, Employment-Based Preference 3rd in the far right column. That's it. I said the labor certification process is the first of 3 steps that are required once you get out of the Department of Labor with a labor certification. And the labor certification basically says, hey, USCIS immigration, we, the people at the Department of Labor, we certify that this employer did the paperwork properly and advertised the job properly to check that there were no Americans out there who were willing, able, or qualified to do the job, so the international worker can have the job. And I say have the job instead of keep the job, because although most of the time you're in line for a green card based on a job you already perform legally in America, you don't have to be. You could be working at another company in America and in line for a second company's green card in America. You could be working overseas in the United Arab Emirates waiting for a green card based on an employment offer that you get in America. Parts 2 and 3 of the process occur at USCIS, at immigration. Immigration now gets the case from the Department of Labor, and the Department of Labor has already told immigration that the first third of the case was properly handled. Now what? Immigration makes you file, and when I say you, I mean your employer. Again, the paperwork burden is on the employer. That's why you get the lawyer. The employer doesn't want to be doing this stuff. All right, so what goes on in part 2 of the process? The employer files the I-140 petition. Everybody talks about the I-140 petition, the immigrant petition. What's it mean? In plain old English, what's it mean? It means that the employer's got to just prove 2 things in order to get you, quote, in line for part 3, which is you applying for your own green card. Part 2, the employer just has to prove 2 things, basically. 1, hey, I'm the employer, and I promise you, since the day we started working at the Department of Labor, I had enough money in profit, or I had enough money laying around in cash on my balance sheet to pay this employee. One of the best ways they can prove that they had the money to pay you is if you're already working there getting paid. Then they just say, hey, look, I can prove that we have enough money to pay the guy. He's been working here since we started the green card process. Look, we never missed a paycheck. If, however, you're not working at the company, you're overseas or working at a second company, and the employer in the I-140 stage needs to prove that they can pay you and that they could have paid you since they started the case, well, then simply they look to the cash on the balance sheet or the net profit laying around before they pay taxes on their tax return. And that's the basic ways to do it. There are other ways with net working capital, blah, blah, blah. So that's one. So the other thing they got to prove, the employer, the other thing they got to prove is, we advertised a job through the Labor Department to test the local labor market, and we had some job requirements listed in there. And guess who they have to prove has those job requirements to meet the qualifications to do the job? You. You. So we compare your CV and your credentials to what was required in the job advertisement. That's it. I promise. Anybody who makes it any more complicated than that doesn't know what the heck they're talking about. That's it. That's it. And part 3 of the PERM labor certification process is the I-485 petition for you and your spouse and any temporarily present children or any children coming with you under the age of 21. Everybody, it's a big happy occasion. The whole family files for green cards or permanent residency. If you're outside America, you file for immigrant visas for the whole family. Happy day. And that's it. That's it. And that's the PERM labor certification in a nutshell, just the basics. And that's enough for you to understand. And then anything else that the lawyer or the employer is throwing out at you are details about either step 1, the labor certification at the Department of Labor, step 2, the I-140, and step 3, that's the personal information you need to provide to get your green card. How tall are you? Where have you lived for the past 5 years? What's your daytime phone number? Do you know that stuff? If you know that stuff, you get a green card. Unless, of course, you're a mass murderer or a bank robber or you beat the hell out of people in bar fights. These are bad things. They don't give green cards to people who commit crimes, so be good. So that's it. And remember, I'll beat it to death. I'll say it again. I will say it again. The PERM labor certification is only the 2 boxes in the last column over to the right, row 2 and row 3. But we got a whole nother couple of rows to talk about and a couple of columns. What?